My mother-in-law is an accountant, and what she does best is sitting in one place for a long time doing her work. It seems to me that she traded everything for her job. No husband, no hobbies, only work. Although she does know how to relax sometimes, to the fullest. That is, she rests the same way she works. Actually, I'm not critical of her, but I'm pondering how much she and I are alike in many ways. It's like looking at her in a mirror and being surprised, am I really like that? Also working as a freelancer, I spend even more time at the desk than she does. I also don't get much joy from various entertainments. I always preferred success at work to them. Usually I don't find time for holidays, but if a holiday did break into my life, I would go all out. So much so that sometimes I didn't remember the end of the holiday, for which I constantly blame myself afterwards. By the way, my mother-in-law is the same way. But there is one difference. I blame myself quietly and no one knows about it. In reality, I justify myself by hook or by crook, even attacking, saying that no one is an angel, while my mother-in-law always worries loudly if you remind her of even her most insignificant misconduct. And I want her not to worry so much, and on the contrary, I focus on the places where she is most ashamed. I just want to eliminate all her fears. So what if she fell asleep in the middle of the holiday? So what if she met some man? In the end, everything is quite within the bounds of decency, which cannot be said about me. But I try to make sure that my mother-in-law does not see it, although often it just doesn't work out. Once I fell asleep in the bathtub, hiding from everyone. She and my wife pulled me naked out of the bathtub and dragged me to the bed. And once I fell asleep not in my own bed, but in my mother-in-law's, firmly hugging her, thinking it was my wife. And how many times I came out naked after a shower, doing it demonstratively, as if to say, look how much I trust you all. And my mother-in-law always forgave me, just like my wife. In this they were similar. They have such quick-to-cool-down characters. Or maybe it's also because my antics were actually more harmless compared to many other drunk men, of which there are plenty among neighbors and acquaintances. Or maybe because in general I was a very good person and valued both my wife and mother-in-law very much, and they knew it. In short, they had long since resigned themselves, and it had ceased to be any kind of event for them. But for me it was, of course, a tragedy that I, albeit very rarely, sometimes cannot control myself. I spent my childhood in Finland, and because of that I had a long-standing dream to build a sauna so that the family would have a sauna day. A day when you can completely relax and spend this important event with the whole family. I saw this more than once in childhood in many families. I especially remember that if you try very hard, you can peek at the neighboring women. Of course, we didn't see much. I don't remember anything special, but the process itself seemed like a whole detective story. Here, of course, I was not going to peep at anyone. I wanted the sauna spirit itself. And such a day came. With my own hands, with the help of YouTube, I built something very similar to a good sauna. It was even a pity to start. Everything smelled of fresh wood and perfect cleanliness. Not at all what it was like in childhood. Everywhere the wood was darkened from time and dampness, and there was bound to be dampness. I studied all this and tried to avoid mistakes and troubles. But the greatest pleasure is when women sincerely admire your work and rejoice at the event. Of course, the main event is the end of the eternal construction. Although it was not easy work, and unfortunately or fortunately, I had to rest with friends and beer very often. Still a wonderful time, I said, remembering how we built. Yes, well done, my mother-in-law said sincerely. I've always been amazed at how you can be equally good at both mental and physical work. Thank you, my dear mother-in-law. I always hugged her when it was about something good, and she was used to it and always reached out to meet me herself. Darling, you're magnificent, my wife hastened to insert a compliment. Golden hands. This meant that today my favorite beer would flow like a river and there would be significantly fewer reproaches than usual. So I was already sipping my beer, launching the sauna for the first time. The sauna was perfect, and how the body rested. This, of course, is not a bathroom. And finally, there is so much space that I can wash my wife with my own hands. And why not? I really like it. Lather up my hands and body and slide, and watch her roll her eyes with pleasure. Of course, we didn't limit ourselves to washing each other. I know how quickly she gets aroused when she washes my body. We tried something new and found quite comfortable places. At one point, we even froze for a long time, kissing like children. I comfortably settled on the shelf, and she sat on my knees. "How cool, honey. How I love you." My wife was on cloud nine. "Yeah." I gently stroked her back with my fingers, and they slid pleasantly over it. We came out of the sauna, where we already met my mother-in-law, who was seriously tuned. "Mom, it's a real high." My wife was being sly. Of course she felt good after such pleasure. "We'll check now," my mother-in-law answered in a businesslike way and disappeared behind the door for a long time, so long that even my wife went to find out how she was doing. But it turned out that everything was just fine. We were in an excellent mood. As I assumed, the sauna quickly became a ritual for us. Well, life, as I said, is quite monotonous for us. Boring? No. We all know how to find positives in everything. We had different times, but we always knew how to support each other. Sometimes my wife lashes out at everything. My mother-in-law and I hide and whisper behind her back, which drives her into a quiet rage. Sometimes we need to hug my mother-in-law from both sides and assure her that everything is fine, and she ends up believing us. And sometimes my nerves give out, and I like how these two women run around me, trying to give me all their care and love. Of course, there are also misunderstandings and long silent wars, but over time, complete mutual understanding came anyway. One thing periodically gnawed at me, that my mother-in-law, such a good woman, was without a man. Of course, she joked it off, saying that she had us and she didn't need anyone else. Then she would say that she was not ready for a relationship yet after her husband's death, although it had been a very long time. We suggested that she find someone someday just for health. At first she was embarrassed, but then apparently she changed her mind and began to say, "Where can I find one like that?" She was, of course, a very decent woman. My wife tried to match her with everyone. She was ready for every passerby. I, on the other hand, approached the issue seriously. I began to look more closely at adult men, first trying to understand whether he was married or not, then what cockroaches he had in his head. It was only later that I realized that in relationships, cockroaches in the head can not only not interfere, but on the contrary, they help people to be even closer. And we even managed to find something similar a couple of times. It seemed to me that for my mother-in-law, these were the worst moments of her life. It strained her very much. She didn't know how to behave. It seemed that she was ready to sink through the ground, and the men were somehow self-absorbed, noticeably more thinking only about themselves. In short, in the end, we postponed this venture to the back burner with a clear conscience. My mother-in-law was an extremely family person, and she never considered other people in the circle of her relatives. And even when we cited me as an example, the fact that I was able to become a member of her family, it was only an exception to the rule for her. But she treated me closer and closer. Sometimes, when I hugged her, it even seemed to me that she behaved like my wife. She also relaxes in my arms when I press her to me. I guess all women are like that, I thought. The thing is, when a woman relaxes strongly in my arms, I want to pick her up so that she stays on her feet or something. And for that, I need to press her harder against me, as hard as I can. And then you feel the fluttering of the female body. And this, excuse me, turns me on. So I began to think that my mother-in-law hadn't had anyone for a very long time. And they say it's very harmful. Now, I understand that I was deceiving myself, but at that time, for some reason, I really wanted to save her. Then I came up with and drove away the thought of the benefits of young blood. Yes, I wanted to sacrifice myself. I began to look at her differently. She turned out to have such pleasant, smooth skin. I noticed how she always reacts to my hugs and kisses. I was especially surprised by my experiment when I kissed her almost on the lips. She seemed to shudder. Since then, I only kissed her where the lips end. She's definitely very hungry. And this thought has already haunted me. Our thoughts materialize, probably, but it is definitely true that thoughts are definitely transmitted to the people around us, especially if you reinforce your thoughts with desire. I've been convinced of this so many times. I remember I really want a girl, and after a while she starts wanting you. But with my mother-in-law, it's not quite like that, or rather, not at all like that. I wasn't going to. I just wanted what was best. On day X, I was working at home as usual. My mother-in-law, as sometimes happens after the holidays, also stayed at home to work. Maybe we should do a sauna so that the body doesn't itch, the head doesn't hurt, I laughed, hinting at her headache from yesterday. You think it's funny? She said seriously, but jokingly. Let's do it. I jumped up joyfully and turned on the switch. Yes, by the word do a sauna, we just mean turn on the stove. But that's exactly what I wanted when I built the sauna. I'm not one of those who are fanatical about doing something with their hands. We still did our own things for a while. My mother-in-law, although she didn't feel very well, didn't show it. It's ready. Will you start? I asked. As you wish. Only I recommend you drink a little so that you don't feel really bad. You're right. I'll do that. Will you keep me company? A few minutes later, my mother-in-law already looked much better, and I felt good too. Maybe I'll steam you with a broom, I said carelessly. Well, okay. It seems to me that my mother-in-law always answered me in the affirmative to all my suggestions. Probably it's trust. In my head, for some reason, some kind of barrier arose that I could break this trust. Yes, I'm just going to steam my mother-in-law to get a high from the sauna, said another part of me. My mother-in-law seemed to be waiting to be steamed, and while I was undressing, she was already lying on her stomach with a sheet thrown over her bottom and looking at me when I entered. So, now... For some reason, I didn't want silence now, and I was mumbling something under my breath. I filled the bucket and poured it over my mother-in-law. The sheet was instantly soaked and stretched over her ass. I even had to lean over a bit so that my reaction to these sights wouldn't be noticeable. Oh, how good! My mother-in-law responded to my manipulations with the broom. I continued to pour water and pass every centimeter with the broom. At some point, I moved the sheet a little and, seeing no reaction, moved it again, and finally threw it away altogether. What are you doing? My mother-in-law turned in surprise. Come on. That's all I could say, but very convincingly. It seemed to convince her, and she relaxed again, closing her eyes. I took the soap and began to help with my other hand to rub her back. Then with both hands I began to knead her legs and thighs. My sheet had long been soaked, and it was visible at the expense of what it was holding at the moment. I glanced at my mother-in-law. There was fear in her eyes, but she didn't stop me. But most likely she couldn't stop me anymore. Things had gone too far. By the way, I didn't hesitate to pour my mother-in-law a good dose of the hangover medicine, which we repeated several times in good doses. And it began to take effect, plus the heat of the sauna, plus this pounding heart. Then everything seemed to be in a fog. I casually threw off the sheet, approached, and then she took the initiative into her own hands. She was far from a prude. She acted confidently. She took everything from me, and even more. And I wanted to give her as much as possible with my soul and body and head. Right from the first minute, I realized that now I would give everything not only to my wife, but also to my mother-in-law. So unexpectedly, this modest woman turned into a woman who would take everything and even more. And I like it most of all. Everything coincided so much that the only thing I regretted was that it hadn't happened before. I don't know what will happen when my wife finds out. I have already imagined this moment so many times. For some reason, it seems to me that at first she will be indignant and will not understand. But then she will understand everything and will not mind. Let it be so. But for now, I have two women. I discovered a strange habit in myself to be here and there in a short period of time. For some reason, it always drives me crazy. And we began to often sleep as a family in the same bed. And my wife approves of how gently I hug her mother, because she dreamed that her husband would love her mother the same way. But she doesn't know yet that I love her even more. Did you like this story? Let us know in the comments what you liked. Subscribe to our storytelling podcast. Also, don't forget to like and ring the bell so you don't miss more interesting stories. See you soon.